They called her the pride of an empire, a fortress of steel built to outgun the world. But on April 7th, 1945, in the cold waters south of Japan, that pride sailed toward its own destruction. The Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, was on a one-way voyage. Her guns were powerful enough to shatter mountains, but the enemy she faced no longer fought on the sea. They ruled the sky. In less than 2 hours, history's mightiest warship would vanish beneath the waves, and with her, the age of the battleship itself. She was a behemoth, 72,000 tons of steel, armed with guns so vast they could hurl a shell the weight of a car across 25 miles of ocean. A floating city manned by over 3,000 sailors, many barely out of their teens, but this time there would be no return. Her fuel was one way, her orders suicidal. As the Allies closed in on Okinawa, Japan's last hope rested on a ship built for a kind of war that no longer existed. In the early 1930s, as the world clung to fragile peace, Japan looked eastward and dreamed of empire. The oceans were its path, and domination at sea was its destiny. Behind locked doors, naval engineers were ordered to build the unthinkable, a battleship so massive, so powerful, that no enemy could face it and survive. Treaties meant to limit Japan's ambitions were cast aside. Blueprints turned into secrets guarded like national treasures. Out of this quiet defiance was born the Yamato, 263 meters of steel, carrying guns larger than any ever mounted on a warship. Each shell weighed over a ton. Each blast shook the sea itself. She was not just a weapon, she was a statement. Japan would never bow to the West. When the Yamato finally touched the sea, she was hailed as the invincible guardian of Japan, the shield that would turn the tide of any war. Yet as the Pacific burned, her guns stayed silent. Admiral Yamamoto, the mind behind Pearl Harbor, feared losing her. The Yamato became more symbol than sword, too valuable to risk, too grand to use. While others fought and died, she waited anchored in distant harbors. Her crew training for a battle that never came. Her sister ship, Musashi, met her end at Leyte Gulf, hammered by waves of American bombers until the sea swallowed her whole. Another Shinano never even reached battle, sunk by a single submarine before she could fire a shot. By 1945, Japan's empire was crumbling. Cities burned, carriers were gone, and the once proud fleet was scattered wreckage. And in this ruin, Yamato, the pride of the Imperial Navy, was called upon one last time, not to win a war, but to die for it. April 5th, 1945. Deep within Japan's remaining naval headquarters, a single order was issued, Operation 10 Ichigo. The Yamato would sail for Okinawa. Her mission: charge into the heart of the American invasion fleet, destroy as many ships as possible, and then beach herself to fight as an immovable fortress. It was, in every sense, a suicide mission. Vice Admiral Seiichi Ito hesitated. He knew the odds: no air cover, no reinforcements, no chance of survival. Yet the Empire demanded sacrifice, and the Yamato, symbol of its power, would now become its martyr. Engineers worked through the night. The ship's tanks were filled not for battle, but for death. Harbor officials, defying orders, secretly gave her more fuel than authorized, enough for a possible return if fate allowed it. But everyone knew it wouldn't. 3,000 men prepared in silence. Cadets were ordered ashore. The youngest spared from the coming inferno. The rest received their final ration of sake. On deck, laughter and songs masked despair. They toasted to the Emperor, to home, to glory, knowing none of them would see it again. At dawn on April 6th, the Yamato slipped from Tokuyama Bay, escorted by the light cruiser Yahagi and 8 destroyers, the remnants of Japan's proud navy. Her massive hull cut through calm waters beneath a gray sky, heading south toward Okinawa, where over 1,000 American planes waited. To the men aboard, it felt less like a mission and more like a funeral procession. Each knew his role in a grand gesture, a final roar of defiance from a nation on its knees. The ocean was silent, the air heavy. For the first time, the Yamato sailed not to claim victory, but to embrace oblivion. While Yamato steamed south, the Americans already knew she was coming. Her radio signals had been intercepted, her movements tracked by submarines lurking in the Bungo Strait. To Admiral Raymond Spruance and his carrier commanders, the mission wasn't a mystery, it was an opportunity. The world's largest battleship was sailing straight into their range. Task Force 58 moved swiftly. Hundreds of aircraft were readied across vast carrier decks, pilots briefed on a single target, Yamato. They would not let her reach Okinawa's shores. From above the Pacific, reconnaissance planes spotted the Japanese column, a slow, doomed procession against the endless sea. To the Americans, it wasn't a battle. It was execution from the sky. The age of the carrier had arrived, and the age of the battleship was about to die. April 7th, 1945. The Pacific was restless beneath a blanket of clouds as Yamato's crew took their stations. Alarms echoed through the corridors. Radar had picked up incoming contacts. Hundreds of blips moving fast. The storm was coming. At 12:30 p.m., the sky erupted. Waves of American aircraft, Hellcats, Corsairs, Helldivers, and Avengers dived out of the clouds like predators. Yamato's anti-aircraft guns thundered to life, filling the air with a storm of steel and smoke. The ship trembled as her massive turrets fired Sanshikidan beehive shells, spewing thousands of incendiary fragments into the sky. But the enemy kept coming. Bombs struck first. 2 exploded deep within her decks, tearing through steel and flesh alike. Fires spread across the aft section. Water flooded in. Still, her crew fought back with desperate precision, feeding the guns, shouting through smoke and chaos. Men were burned, blinded, thrown overboard, but they did not abandon their posts. The sea that had once carried the Yamato now claimed her. Burning oil spread across the waves, painting the horizon in black and orange. The few destroyers that survived searched the wreckage for life, their decks crowded with the wounded and the stunned. Of the more than 3,000 men who had sailed that morning, barely 300 would be pulled from the water. Many floated for hours amid debris and drifting bodies. Some refused rescue, choosing instead to sink quietly into the deep beside their ship. Others clung to planks and wreckage, whispering the names of family, of home, of a Japan they would never see again. Among the survivors were young sailors who would live to tell how the ocean turned to fire, how the air itself seemed to burn, and how the pride of their nation died not in victory, but in silence. For the Americans who watched from above, it was a grim triumph. The mightiest warship ever built had fallen without firing a shot at an enemy ship. The age of the battleship was over, and the age of the carrier had begun. As night fell over the Pacific, the sea grew calm again. Where the Yamato had stood, there was only smoke, wreckage, and the quiet roll of waves, the final requiem for a dream too heavy to float. When the smoke cleared and the waves swallowed the last fragments of steel, the Yamato's story didn't end, it transformed. What began as a symbol of invincibility became a monument to the futility of pride. Her death marked not just the fall of a ship, but the end of an age, the twilight of the battleship and the dawn of air power. For Japan, the loss of Yamato was more than military defeat. It was spiritual. She had embodied the nation's will to fight, even when logic said the war was lost. To the young men who sailed aboard her, she was mother and weapon, a floating city of purpose in a collapsing world. When she sank, so too did the illusion that courage alone could triumph over modern war. In the years that followed, Devers found her shattered hull resting quietly 340 meters below the East China Sea, her massive guns still pointing toward the surface as if reaching for the light. Corrosion covered her decks, but her legend endured, retold in books, films, and whispered by those who had lived through her final hours. Today, Yamato stands not as a symbol of conquest, but as a warning of the dangers of hubris, of the human cost of glory. She was the last breath of an era that believed size and power could defy progress. But history decided otherwise. The ship that was meant to rule the seas became a tomb beneath them. And in that silence lies a truth that echoes beyond war, that even the mightiest creations of man are powerless against the tide of change. Beneath the quiet waves of the East China Sea, the Yamato still sleeps, her steel twisted, her decks silent and her name eternal. She was born from ambition, forged in pride and lost to time. Yet her story endures, not as a tale of glory, but as a testament to the cost of chasing it. The battleship era ended the day she fell. And though the sea forgets the sound of guns, it never forgets the weight of sacrifice. The Yamato did not win a battle. She became one. Between the past and the future, she stands as a ghostly reminder that power fades, but memory never sinks.